the senior producer from NFL Films, also the co-host of the NFL Matchup Show on ESPN, which will be rejoining the football universe in the not-too-distant future. I know everybody waits with bated breath for that breakdown show. It is Greg Cosell joining us here. And, Greg, it was a beatdown of the Bears by the Bills on Saturday for a number of reasons. But first and foremost, the headline story. Mitchell Trubisky returns to put a thumping on his former team as Brian Daboll sets him up for success with a quick passing game that seemed to put him in an early rhythm.
Oh, it was so beautiful because obviously Trubisky does not have the talent of Josh Allen, so the offense was different. And it was all quick rhythm. It was quick game. It was RPOs. It allowed Trubisky to be decisive. There were really one-read throws. The thing that really stood out to me also was how many times they would put the tight end as the single receiver to the short side of the field with the back offset to the boundary as well. And he'd either throw it to the tight end Knox or he'd throw it to the back Singletary. It's basically you're reading the underneath defender, but everything made it such that Trubisky could be really decisive and play with timing and structure, and it just looked pretty.
I mean, a performance like Trubisky had on Saturday against the Bears, does this kind of say this is a quarterback who does have another shot at being a starting quarterback maybe after this year with the Buffalo Bills?
You know, Maddie, that'll be fascinating because obviously the league told him this year that he was not a starter. Because if someone saw him as a true starter or even competing as a starter, he wouldn't be in Buffalo. So we don't have to interpret that, Maddie. The league told us that. And that's why he signed with Buffalo, where he's clearly a backup. And we all hope that he doesn't take, that the only snaps he might take this year are at the end of games if the Bills, are winning 40-10. But otherwise, we hope he doesn't see the field. So that's a tough question to answer. But you would think, and again, it's preseason, and you don't want to make too much of it, but I'm just talking about schematically. I thought what Brian Daboll did really played to what Trubisky is, because Trubisky is not a sit in the pocket late in the down thrower. If he does that where he sort of sits on his back foot, because he's a locked front leg thrower, which means he can't really drive the football, he has to play in rhythm. He has to play with timing. And Brian Daboll obviously knows that, and he did such a good job. So who knows? Maybe someone will look at that and say, hey, if he can play that way, if we can get him to play that way, maybe he can be a starter because he does have mobility, obviously, as well.
Let's move on to the backs here because they were a story coming into this game, chiefly because Zack Moss missed the first game against Detroit due to a hamstring injury. So he was up and played some. So, too, did Singletary. And Manny and I talked about this earlier in the show, Greg, because Motor really worked hard in the offseason. I know all these guys work hard in the offseason, but really worked on improving his burst and his speed, particularly to the edge, which was a problem for this running game last year. Now, Manny and I were joking about this because the tackling by the Bears, especially on his touchdown play, was horrendous. But what have you seen from Singletary in terms of burst and explosion this year, maybe in comparison to last year?
Well, it's funny you say that because I actually thought that you saw something on it. He caught a 5-yard swing pass to the boundary out of that 1x3 set that I was talking about earlier. And I thought that he showed really good balance and lateral quickness, showed great agility to string moves together. It's only 5 yards, but I thought you saw it there. But, overall, guys, I think with the run game, because obviously Josh is going to be the quarterback, and this will be a passing team for the most part, I think what they want with the run game is just efficiency, because this is not a team, with few exceptions. There may be games, and we're looking at Singletary now, although that was Robert Quinn, and that missed tackle, and that was really good balance. But I think with this run game, it's secondary to the pass game. They just want it to be efficient when they run the ball, which is interesting then how it relates to Moss, because I always believed Moss, when I watched his tape in college, that he was really more of a volume back, because he's more of a grinder, a sustainer, a competitive runner. I don't think Moss necessarily, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think Moss is the kind of back that you give the ball to 7 or 8 times a game. But I think in the context of this offense, if it's working the way it's supposed to, I don't think he's really going to get a whole lot more than that. Do you guys think so? I mean, he's certainly not going to be a foundation back. He's not getting 18 carries a game.
Yeah, it's interesting just with the running backs. I mean, we were talking about what the roster is going to look like and who could make the final 53. And you look at some of the position groups that they may keep more players a part of: defensive line, offensive line, and running back or tight end or linebacker, maybe a couple of those positions where they keep a guy or two less. But I agree with you. I think this running game is going to be a running game that needs to work when they need to go to the run game. Other than that, it's going to be Josh Allen's passing offense, what it was last year, what he was so successful at. And the offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll and Sean McDermott, aren't afraid to say that. They know what this offense is. They know what it was last year, and they know what it's going to be this year. But staying on offense, another position group where we're still trying to figure out what it is the tight ends. I mean, Dawson Knox last year had injuries. He wasn't on the field as much as we hoped he would. Suffered an injury, was also on the COVID-19 list. We've been able to see other tight ends step up in training camp this year. Unfortunately, Tommy Sweeney is dealing with a foot injury right now, so we were able to see Jacob Hollister in the game against the Chicago Bears. He had 3 catches for 53 yards. What did you see out of his performance on Saturday, and maybe what he can add to that group when his number is called?
Yeah, Hollister's been in the league, and he's one of those tight ends that's a little more athletic, not high-level athletic, or he'd be more than he is, but he's more of an athlete than a big-bodied grinder. He caught that boundary seam throw where no one carried him, and it was actually it was a pitch and catch kind of throw for Trubisky. But Hollister is a guy that has good athleticism. Knox does too. Obviously, in this kind of offense, they would really like the tight end to be a factor as a receiver. They like to split out the tight end. They like those 1-by-3 sets where the tight end is the single receiver to the short side of the field. So, Hollister could well be that guy. Look, I've always liked Dawson Knox. He's at times struggled to catch the ball. I don't know if they view that as an issue, but because I think he's got a lot of talent. He's a very athletic kid. Hollister could easily fit into this group.
And then taking it a step further in the passing game, Greg, I thought Isaiah McKenzie did an excellent job of making a case for himself to be the backup to Cole Beasley in the slot. Going into this camp, I still thought that McKenzie was going to be a package player and nothing more on the offense, especially if he winds up being the primary return man, which looks like it's going to be the case. He showed me something these last 2 games, just his ability to get early separation in the down, working in the short to intermediate areas. What do you think about his, down the road role here as we move into the season? Could he serve as a backup to Cole Beasley?
Oh, without question, Chris, without question. I mean, he was featured in the RPO game. You saw him do such a good job getting off the line of scrimmage versus press coverage against 2 different corners, as I recall. It might have been Shelley. I think it was Christian as well. And just the way he was able with that quick, hard step outside to create separation on the inside right away with the slants. They got him the ball in the screen game to take advantage of his run after catch ability. So, I think there's no question. Look, he had some success last year. He caught a number of touchdowns. I can remember one against, I think it was against Seattle, where he ran the over route against cover 3, caught a touchdown on a good throw from Josh Allen. So he definitely can fit that. But, hey, Chris, I can't let this whole segment go, though, without talking about Spider 2, Why Banana. That was the touchdown to Kumaro. You got to talk about that.
Well, yeah, sure. I didn't see Kumaro on your list
all day
here.
Just to say that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I didn't see Kumaro on our list here, so I didn't want to throw you a guy that maybe you didn't grind on as heavily as some of the others. But yeah, Kumaro's.
I just felt like saying that,
Yeah,
I felt like being John Gruden there for a minute. Spider 2, Why Banana.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Kumaro's had a really good camp, and if they keep 6 receivers, at this point in time, it's probably McKenzie and Kumaro as the 5 and the 6.
And Kumara, look, he played some last year. I remember he caught that seed from Josh against the Broncos last year, and that was a seed.
Yeah, Kumaro's and fun player to watch. I mean, the catches that he's been able to make in training camp, we all know Josh Allen is good for a couple of those really impressive throws every few practices. I mean, to watch the offense this year, it looks like that group is truly taking a step forward, and it's been nice to see Kumaro add to that mix because he wasn't on the team all of last year. No. He was on the team for part of the year, but I feel like the fans and us media members have really been able to see, okay, this is a guy that can make an impact when his number is called. He has nice hands. He has a taller body and frame for a wide receiver. But moving to the defense, I want to talk about these young defensive linemen that are now part of this group. And Chris and I talked about it a little bit earlier in the show, but I feel like Boogie Basham was a little bit lost in that first preseason performance against the Detroit Lions. And it might have been a case of, you're a rookie. You gotta have one game to kind of figure it all out, get into it. But against the Bears, he looked like a defensive lineman who could make an impact and was taking on double teams and was doing some of the dirty work at times for this defensive line to help out guys right next to him. What did you learn from his performance on Saturday?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. He is not a sudden, twitchy, natural bender type player. He almost reminded me, and I thought this when I watched his Wake Forest tape as well, Maddie. He's almost an old school 4-3 strong side DN. His game is built on power, strength, hand usage, technique, relentlessness, competitiveness. I think every defensive line, particularly a 4-3 D line, needs that kind of player. And I think, as we saw again this past week, he lined up both outside at D end and inside at D tackle. I think you'll continue to see that because I think he might be at his best as a pass rusher working inside in the sub fronts.
And then the other two guys, the young players that they invested highly in up front, Epinesa and Rousseau. I think the thing about Rousseau, and Coach McDermott mentioned this after the game, Greg, it's not just that he's flashing some ability to make an early impact, even though he probably doesn't have it all figured out as a rookie in the pass rush, but he's done pretty well in the run front as well.
Glad you said that because I made a note of a play. I started the Bears' second possession where he set the edge on a 1-yard run by Williams because he was the boundary D end on that play. And you saw the arm extension. He kept his body and his feet clean. No, that was the kind of play that you don't really notice because he didn't make the tackle, but a really good play. And then he had, I guess he got credit for a sack on that where he had that one-arm stab, that inside one-arm stab. And he's shown that now for 2 weeks in a row. And you mentioned it last week, Chris, he really looks long on tape. I mean, he is a big body. And then Epinesa had a really good pass rush, I guess, late in the second quarter, I believe, around the 2-minute mark. Yep. And he also had that inside arm stab, and he just drove back the left tackle. That was an impressive rush.
Yeah, really quickly, Maddie, before you jump in again, I know that after the game, Epinesa, when he was interviewed, he said that they were watching the Bears on tape and that what they discerned was when they saw them go into a quick kick slide, they immediately used that cue to bull rush, to get up under them and drive them onto their heels so they could push into the pocket. So it was a film study thing that these young players recognized and took advantage of in the game, and that's why those tackles at times were on roller skates.
Oh, yeah, because if you can strike first, because if you can get inside of an offensive tackle, then no matter how strong he is, it doesn't matter. Yeah, because you can just drive him back. And I thought Rousseau only played 9 or 10 snaps in the whole game, but Epinesa on that rush we were talking about, man, he just took, I think it was Wilkinson, the left tackle, and he just literally, it's like he lifted him off the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exciting to see from a defensive line that this coaching staff and Brandon Beane, they've invested in so much in the last couple drafts, in the last 3 drafts, really, with high draft picks. So it's nice to see it paying off in preseason. I know it's just preseason, so hopefully it translates to week 1, 2, 3, and beyond, where this defensive line takes a step forward from last year in terms of rushing the passer and really being effective rushing just 4 guys. And I want to bring up one more person on defense. It's a part of the cornerback group, or he's a part of the cornerback group. And of course, we know of Tre'Davious White, we know of Levi Wallace, and we know of some of the guys who have been on the roster for a little bit longer and what they can provide. But some of these later round draft picks, some of these undrafted guys who are younger, a part of this group, have had a nice camp. And Rachad Wildgoose is one of those players who have made some plays that have really stood out in the last couple weeks. What did you see from him against the Bears?
Yeah, he was a good college player, and he played left corner, so he played both to the boundary and the field. I thought he ran stride for stride on some vertical routes. I thought he actually made a really good play. It was 3rd and 3 in the 3rd quarter, and the Bills were playing cover 3. And this really stood out to me because I learned from my buddy Matt Bowen, who loves to say, don't cover grass. And this was a play where Wildgoose was the boundary corner, but they were playing zone. And the receiver, Adams, stemmed inside. And instead of just staying outside, which a lot of cover 3 corners do because they're responsible for that deep outside third, he squeezed inside with Adams, and he was in position to break up the pass. I don't know if you remember that play, guys, but it was just one of those plays that I noticed on tape and thought, that's just really good savvy. Instead of just standing outside and saying, hey, it's cover 3, I'm playing my outside third, he squeezed inside and made a really good play to create an incompletion. And I thought that showed for a rookie really good savvy.
Yeah, and that's going to be – that's one of those fascinating reserve position battles that I have a sickness with, Greg, because
you just like saying the name Wildgoose, Chris.
Well, that's part of it. I'll admit it. But him and Nick McLeod, the Notre Dame product, formerly of NC State, are 2 guys that have flashed in this secondary. Wildgoose more so in the Detroit game, or in this game against Chicago. But McLeod has shown up in both games and flashed. And he's a bigger corner. I think he offers the Bills maybe something they don't have in plentiful supply. He's a 6-foot corner, and he's 193. I mean, he's got some meat to him, and I just think I wonder if the Bills are experimenting and seeing maybe if they can take a page out of the Ravens playbook with knowing the physical corners that the Ravens have. Maybe they want to see if they can add a little more physicality to their back end.
Well, everybody likes bigger if you can play. Believe me, you know that.
That's a big if, though.
You talk to any scout, and they'll say, I like big if they can still run and play. Quick question, because I'm not there every day, and maybe you can help me here. How is Hamlin doing?
Hamlin's done very well. As a matter of fact, I think he and Josh Thomas, the App State product, are 2 safeties that are firmly in the running to be backups to Hyde and Poyer. Maddie and I were discussing this, and I think we both agree that Jaquan Johnson, who's been here for 2 years but has missed the last few days of practice and did not play in the game against Chicago, now has some catching up to do.
Yeah, and it's a shame because he's the Miami product, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because I remember watching his college tape and loving the player, but just thinking the way in which he played, he was too small. But I love the player.
Yeah, but Thomas and Hamlin have been very aggressive, particularly coming up and filling in the run front. And I know that's usually priority 1 for young players when they come to this defense. Manny and I were just talking about it on the show today. Coach Frazier basically encourages these guys, if they see something, trust their instincts, go make a play. And if they're wrong, they'll correct it later. But he wants to see that from them in practice and in preseason games.
And I liked Hamlin's tape a lot. I just wondered if he would be athletic enough, as a true safety. I mean, I think he's much better closer to the line of scrimmage, but I thought he was a really good player at Pitt.
Maddie, you got anything else for Greg?
Nope. Thank you so much, Greg. It's exciting to know that we're just a couple weeks away here from week 1. I know you're going to be looking forward to seeing some regular season games. I know it's tough. It's tough to evaluate all these guys in preseason. I mean, you're seeing players that are players who were drafted low or players who have been on different teams every single year. So these are guys that usually don't get talked about as much that are being talked about a whole lot right now.
Hey, Maddie, even I, every once in a while, have to look up a guy and see where he's from, So that tells me, man, we're still playing with 100 guys here.
Yeah, we're getting really deep in the weeds in the preseason. But that's okay, because what else are we going to do until we get to regular season football? Greg,
That's
as always,
right.
thanks for the breakdown. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, that's senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, joining us here on the program to break down some of the players and their performances from last week's game against Chicago.